running the pilots of those, but I believe it is fundamentally different from what has been suggested in this report and what the goals and objectives are. So over to you, Femke.
Thank you. Yes, I understood the question also in terms of basically emission trading rather than taxation. So to create a market for these carbon rights. And again, as I said before, carbon is only one of the 100 options that we include in our story. So we shouldn't probably focus just on carbon, but just use it as an example. Yes, there are cap and trade systems in the world today. The European emission trading system is currently the biggest carbon market in the world. When China launches its emission trading system, it will be larger than that. And that the trading system has worked very badly for a number of years because of the rights being too many rights being dispersed among industries. So let's say a cap and trade system has one advantage is that you can predefine the amount of emissions that are being allowed, and you leave it to the market to put a price on that. And now in the European example, the too many rights were actually dispersed, so the price per ton of carbon was extremely low, and not enough to have any impact on investment decisions. But now, recently, the European Commission has reduced the number of rights circulating in the market, and now the price has gone up to, I think, 20 euros per ton, which is actually becoming very effective in impacting the types of fuels, for example, used across the board. The difference between a tax and a trading system is that there is no clear price on a commodity, and that can be both an advantage. It can be very beneficial. Lots of great things have happened in these types of markets, but it doesn't actually help businesses. It can sometimes be unclear what the price is and when an investment becomes profitable. So also green taxes have been proven to be more effective in the way they work, more than standards. So there are a number of advantages that taxes have that trading systems don't have. I don't think there is one way to do this. There will be more and more ways to deal with climate change and the disruption and the pricing of those externalities, and also in let's say supporting the businesses that are doing good things. So I'm not saying this is the only way to go forward. What I'm saying is that if we continue on the path that we do now, that's the financial incentives that we have now, then the pathway is pretty clear. It will be linear, and it will be more destruction, and also fewer jobs because of the costs for businesses of hiring people, and therefore also more poverty. So if you connect those two together, I'm not saying that different systems cannot be combined. So this is not to say that tax is the only way to go, but if the incentives, as Omer said, remain as they are, we're not going to solve the issues that we have. So I think creative, different solutions are extremely valuable and should be explored and contributed to the international debate. And we think this alignment of tax with the goals that we have in terms of the SDGs is super important, and really needs to be addressed in different countries and as well as regionally and globally.
Yes, thank you very much both. On the carbon credit trading system, Femke's explained some of the problems very clearly. I think I think the advantage that tax may have over them is, as you say, it's more transparent. So if you say put a consumption tax on a certain product, then the amount of the cost that's being passed on to consumers is clear for everyone to see. the same costs through a carbon credit system is also being passed on to consumers, but in that case, the system is would be much that the amount of costs being passed on would be much less clear, and also the other benefit being that the tax revenues can be reinvested to for broader SDG goals as well. And I wonder, from hearing you talk, Asan, or whether you were thinking that we were proposing a separate new tax. I think this may not necessarily always be the case, and indeed we don't want tax systems to get overcomplicated for many reasons, for businesses to be able to operate with them, and to have a certain level of stability and also public buy-in as well. But there's a lot of what we're proposing that can sit within the existing tax system. So, for example, taxing natural resource use and consumption. Most countries already have fuel duties. We have indirect taxes that can be incorporated, and in using the revenues as well, we are sort of adjusting the amount of sort of personal income tax and payroll taxes, but that we're not talking about changing the system, and other tax incentives such as R&D, tax relief, and in investment incentives. All of those are sort of existing mechanisms that we can just sort of build on to add that aspect of sort of considering a business's external impact. And indeed, on R&D tax relief, that's a conversation that we're currently exploring in the UK with UK businesses as to how, for example, the UK R&D tax system might be updated, or to incentivize circular businesses, for example, innovations for for a circular economy. So these are just a few thoughts. I think one of the questions that's come in referred to people in the Middle East, I think in particular, preferring a no tax approach, and how introducing a tax system in the way that's being proposed will go down there. And I think certainly there are challenges, and culturally in some jurisdictions, perhaps it requires a mentality shift that sort of probably sees tax as not just a negative thing that companies must suffer, but also to think of tax as a way of sort of engaging with society, for a business or an individual to contribute to that society, and actually to feel more part of the sort of actively participating in the society. I don't know whether you have anything you want to add to that, Femke or Omer.
Well, yes. You know the saying, taxes are what we pay for civilized society. And nobody likes to pay tax, first of all. I mean, it's pretty clear that nobody really loves to send a check to the government paying taxes. We all try and minimize it, or you know, so it's not that. It's a popular subject, and and that's why probably there is very little conversation about it. But we have to change that if we actually want to tackle these massive challenges that we're facing not just nationally, but also internationally. We have to realize that pricing externalities or pricing the use of resources can actually help advance our economies and create safer and healthier societies. So, you know, it's both. It's not people not liking to pay tax, but it's also understanding that they are the basis for a society to deal with collective issues that individuals cannot solve, like most of the problems that are only growing bigger and bigger in this era. So it's about recognizing the fact that individuals cannot solve everything, and that we have to have collective means to address these collective challenges and threats, and to build stronger economies that are beneficial to our population, and that facilitates businesses to create jobs rather than pollution. So yeah, I'm sympathetic with the call for no taxes at all. At the same time, we have to realize that that is not going to work, and that also in the Middle East, where huge amounts of young people are unemployed, where the challenge of climate change are knocking at the doors, where the challenge of staying competitive in a 1.5 degree world is hugely important, and is being recognized by leaders as well. So it's to start with this discussion. It's not easy. I'm in this field now for 10 years, and it's not easy to talk about tax at all. But I think we have to, and we have to address these collective challenges. Thanks.
Well, very well said. Not much left to elaborate anyway. I totally agree with what Femke and Yen-Pei has put. I'll furthermore add on to it that the challenges has resulted in the culture being shifted. I mean, we all know the VAT that has been introduced in UAE and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well. So there have been shifts in the cultural as well as the tax landscapes in the Gulf as well. There was a time when they had the resource which they believed would be unlimited. Secondly, the realization of the impact in terms of the environment and the consequences was not as clear as it is today. So all these factors, and there are certain additional things as well, they are coming together, and as Faye pointed out, there has been shift in the Gulf as well, where VAT has been introduced. People have accepted that. There are already been talks about income taxes being introduced in the next phase as well, to develop a sustainable economy, because as much as we all would love to have free lunches, unfortunately there are none in this world. So there is a cost associated with every resource, and that is basically the premise of this entire research report as well, that tax can act as a force for good if it is used as a cost for using the resources, using the natural resources. So taking forward that premise, I think the culture has been shifted. There are some shifts, and this process will continue to evolve. We have to remember that certainly it's an evolution that is taking place, and that would continue to take place. And as a result of that, people would realize more and more the consequences of the climate change, and these areas, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, these are some of the areas that are most impacted by the climate change as well. So hopefully the realization would get stronger and stronger with time. And you rightly said, Femke, nobody likes to pay taxes, and that's the conversation I've been having for last 15 years as well with the businesses, that it's just a necessary cost of your business. Treat it like that. Yes, we all love to minimize the cost and the taxes, but the fact of the life is you can't survive, you can't have a functioning society, let alone a civilized society, without paying your due shares of taxes. Over to you, Yen-Pei.
Yes, following that up, probably quite appropriately, there's a comment that's come in saying we Pakistani as a nation wants to pay taxes, but the problem is that will government spend it in the right direction? That's the major fear. And are there checks and balances for governments in other countries? I think it's sort of concerns that government are spending the tax revenue appropriately. I think this sort of communicating how the national budget is being used is a massive challenge in a lot of countries. In the UK, when you pay your taxes, you get a statement that shows sort of according to the amount of tax you pay, how much has gone to which servers, how much has gone to finance what. And I suppose that's a first step, but even the government here is still struggling to communicate that properly. And partly, I suppose, there's also what's needed is also a sort of public education about the role of taxes to start with. Well, some of the innovations that might help sort of to build trust and has been done on smaller scales now is participatory budgeting. So I think, for example, in the city of Paris has a certain amount of budget each year where citizens are invited to suggest what they want to do with that budget, and then vote on what should happen. So that is that's sort of possibly a solution in some cases. I'll hand over to you.
I was actually waiting for that question because this question pops up in normally almost every session with anything to do with taxation, and I was surprised why still up till now it hasn't popped up. So finally we are here. I think you have adequately drawn a comparison. Basically, this is a question of trust deficit, and it's not just in Pakistan. If you look at this region, that's a common phenomena across this region. Entire South Asia suffers the same thing. There's that debate going on that we'll pay our due taxes once the governments start delivering the standards of the developed countries or the Western or American standards. And the governments have been saying, well, you need to start paying your due taxes for us to be able to do that. So it's like that catch-22 situation. A good trend has been that technology lately has been used to try to make the processes simplified, easier, and try to win over the trust of the people. The taxation system and regimes are somewhat different to the Western systems. So like, for example, you gave example of UK and Paris, where local governments are very active, and people even have a participatory budget, and they are given details, and they are part of the process where they want to spend those budgets. Local government system in most of these countries are not as efficient or strong. So taxation normally is at the state or national level, where it does become very difficult to provide that sort of information, though certainly it would be helpful if that's provided. The way I see things is that paying our due taxes is not only a national and civic duty, it's also necessary for you, for your kids, for your family to live in a good environment and have the standard of life that you desire. So that is a cost you have to bear, just like if you want your kids to have private education, and you'll associate with that more Yen-Pei. Most of the countries in this region have this trend that the parents want their kids to have private education if they can afford, rather than go to the public school. And they are more than happy to pay that cost, although those costs are usually very high. Why? Because they believe this would deliver value. So similarly, these taxes need to be seen as delivering value. For that, simplification of tax systems is very important. Structural reforms where subjectivity and ambiguity are removed are important. Use of technology especially IT has provided us so many avenues. That is critical. Communication, as you rightly pointed out, is extremely important and vital. The more transparent the processes would be, the more just the taxation systems would be, as ACCA also advocate in those 12 global tenets of taxation, the more confidence the ordinary taxpayer would have in the tax system. Having said that, these things take time. Again, it's an evolutionary process. It's not like a revolution that we'll have a discussion today and tomorrow, boom, the entire system would change. So we all need to play our part here, and even the taxpayers need to play their part. I mean, I know people who are able to afford taxes and who otherwise have no issues. I mean, they pay very high amounts in charities. And just the other day, I was sitting with a gentleman, and he was very proudly telling me that my charity bill is 100 times my taxation bill. 100 times. And I was saying, okay, great, fantastic. You are doing a good, noble cause. Hats off to you. But did you ever think that you are maybe doing something wrong in actually taking the right away from the lesser segments of society by not paying your due share of the taxes? Just yesterday, we had an ACCA event in Faisalabad. That's one of the larger industrial cities in Pakistan. And one of the conversation we had was around this, that look, yes, there is a difference in tax avoidance and tax evasion. We all want to minimize the taxation, and that's legal. But we have reached a point where you have to ask this question, whether that is ethical too. Are you using text as a force for good? So we can't see these things in isolation. They are all components of the bigger picture. All of these things need to happen together. Regulators and governments need to have a shift in the taxation policies towards a more just and transparent system with less subjective measures. And similarly, taxpayers also need to be educated, and there need to be a cultural shift per se in realizing that this is the cost, a civic cost of ensuring that you are living in a society which offer the necessary standards, not just to you, but also to lesser segments of society where you are paying your due shares so that their living standard can be uplifted as well. Because if you don't do that, that would eventually come to hound you as well. I mean, we have gone through the history where there have been major shifts in the economic or other balances in various countries. French Revolution is something that we often quote. So we all know what can be the repercussions. So if this realization would be strong, if we as professionals play our part in educating the people, if the government and regulators play their part in winning over the trust of the public, then although it is difficult, but it's not something that cannot be achieved.
Thank you, Omer. Well spoken.
Thank you.
I don't think I have anything to add. Maybe the question was also about the checks and balances, and yes, there are checks and balances. We can check upon our governments on the way they spend the money raised. It's a bit easier in economies where there's a standardized form of reporting, or where there's comparison being made within a region, or for example within the OECD. So for companies for countries to join that kind of reporting mechanisms really does help for the general public to keep an eye on the way it's spent. So to support that kind of development and standardization of data, I think is also very important. And this is where the financial community comes in. It's a very important role for finance professionals to assist governments as well as businesses to provide the proper data, both for understanding business dynamics and for creating better policies. So this is why it's so important that the ACCA is involved in this type of research, and that is spreading this message across its membership. So in order to hopefully engage more and more people in this research and in order to create more checks and balances as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I see we are coming up to time. So thank you very much for the very active participation and discussion that we've been having. This is really sort of what we would really love to have around the world, a lot more of these conversations. So I think we've covered a wide ground, and certainly we're not talking about a simple fix here. We're looking at changes in business models, changes in cultural attitudes towards tax, but I think certainly not changing anything is not an option, and these changes can be achieved if we start now, and each of us start spreading the discussion. So I don't know if either Femke or Omer want to have any closing words, and then we can close this session.
I would just like to thank all the participants who took time out today. It's a working day, and during working hours in such huge numbers, it's really great, and it shows the level of interest in this vital topic. And I would like to thank the entire ACCA team for organizing this. I would like to thank you, Yen-Pei, for handling the entire session, and I would like to thank Femke for her work, for the very well spoken narratives today, for explaining these concepts to us, and for all of you for doing these endeavors, because it's very important professionally, but I think it's also important for us all as a humanity, because our future and survival depends on this too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, can we please move to the last slide, and then we will have the contact details, and we could leave that there. So any more comments, please keep them coming at this address, and do check out the X-Tax project too. Thank you so much, Femke, and thank you so much, Omer, and thanks to everyone who's taken part. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.